Both candidates are, at this point, incredibly populist in the sorts of things they put forward. And none of them has a plan to pay for any of this. And at a minimum, we need that fiscal discipline, that sense that, okay, I want to accomplish X, but be honest with the citizens of this country and say, I need to pay for it, and I need X or X plus something to cover those costs.
Welcome to The Ripple Effect, the podcast that takes you on a journey through the minds of Wharton faculty. I'm your host, Dan Loney, and in each episode, we'll be diving deep into the inspiration behind the groundbreaking research that Wharton professors have conducted and exploring how their findings resonate with the world today.
Well, currently the national debt is probably around $30 trillion, maybe crossing that barrier. The debt to GDP ratio is closing in on 100%, but continues to grow. And we just surpassed a plateau where the interest payments on current debt is about $1 trillion a year. Obviously, the debt is a significant issue, yet the candidates for president aren't talking about it a lot. We're joined here in studio by Wharton finance professor Joao Gomes, who testified earlier this year in front of Congress about the issues around the debt, and he joins us here in studio. Joao, great to talk to you again.
Great talking to you, Dan. Thank you for having me.
So seeing the debt rise in the manner that it has, what are the larger scale impacts that we are potentially looking at here, potentially in the relative near future?
Relative near future is a little hard to say. I think it is progressively worrisome. My favorite analogy, it's a bit like gaining weight. You go to your doctor and you look at the data and you're getting a little bit heavier. You're getting a little heavier. Why don't you do something about it? And you say, oh, I'll do something about it in 2 years, in 5 years, in 10 years, and I'll be fine. And you sort of kind of fine, but you never know. But at some point you're not fine anymore. And I'm fairly sure that they will come, right? Whether it's 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or just next year. I can't be sure. But the probabilities that you're going to get in trouble are going up all the time. So I always say I'm not super worried about the debt right now. I am really worried about where it's going to go, what it's projected to go. And the fact that politicians don't seem to care one bit, left or right, they just plan to spend more. That I'm really worried about.
So take us into what the gist of your testimony was back in Congress back in March.
That was a very specific hearing on climate change and fiscal policies that supported or a number of measures to address climate change. And the point that I tried to make there was I see the debt problem as bigger and more urgent than the climate challenge. It will come earlier. We will face a fiscal crisis anytime, I think, in the next 10 or 15 years. 10 will be almost the outer bound that I would put on that. And when it happens, it will touch all of us. And I really mean all of us. Every part of the economy, from the banking system and our bank deposits there to our paychecks to Social Security, Medicare. There'll be damage, mortgages across the whole economy, the value of the dollar. I think that's a more urgent and more pressing concern. And I think the way we think about some of these longer term challenges is not to minimize them. They're really important, but there's only so much money we can spend addressing them without thinking that, well, that's going to create a much bigger problem in the short run.
What type of approach then do we need to look at to at least start to get that train rolling down the tracks?
I think we need to first not make any really silly mistakes. I think a lot of times a debt crisis happens because a particular set of politicians, I'm going to say, but that would include a chair of the Federal Reserve, just loses the trust of financial markets. They propose a certain set of policies or make certain types of put forward some types of ideas that just make people wake up to the sense that this is just not working. This is just not somebody I can trust with $2 trillion,
right.
$2 more trillion this year. So I think that's important. But I think people need to think about how do we pay for some of these proposals that we make. Whether you're on the left or on the right on this, it doesn't really matter. Both candidates are at this point incredibly populist in the sorts of things they put forward. And none of them has a plan to pay for any of this. And at a minimum, we need that fiscal discipline, that sense that, okay, I want to accomplish X, but be honest with the citizens of this country and say, I need to pay for it, and I need X or X plus something to cover those costs. And until we do that, I think we live in this pretend world that we can just borrow more and more and more. And for a while, we can continue to gain weight. We can continue to overeat. But the penalty is going to be severe. And the question is just, which generation and which point and which political party is going to be in power when it happens.
So you talk about the potential of a financial crisis. To what extent are we talking about, like multiples beyond what we saw in 2008?
Oh, I think so. I absolutely think so. In fact, it could work in reverse. One of the things we saw both in 2008 and 2020 with COVID was both of those episodes. It was something that didn't have anything directly to do with the government. It was not a fiscal crisis, so to speak, with the Treasury, but the economic crisis that unfolded created, the debt might have gone up 15, 20% of GDP in both episodes because the government felt the need to send stimulus checks, to bail out banks, to do various types of things. And so it could work that way. But if it is a pure fiscal crisis in the sense that folks wake up one morning and say, we just don't have confidence in the U.S. government anymore, we will have a serious economic crisis in our hands. I mean, we would have, in that scenario, we might have to tighten our belt by the equivalent of $2 trillion. I mean, just think about the spending cuts that entails and the damage that would do to the economy. Nothing else. And nothing else. If that was just it, so I think it's a very scary. And I'm an optimist by nature. I mean, I continue to hope that we'll find our way out of this. But if that scenario unfolds, it is a very scary scenario.
And then a variety of different programs, thinking like Medicare, Social Security. All of these are ones that would have to take a significant haircut in order to be able to keep them up and running.
A real possibility. Another possibility is a very sharp increase in taxes, which again, and I say, we always talk about at the end of the day, to cover a deficit of $1 or $2 trillion, it's taxes on everyone. I mean, we would have a substantial tax increase on every single person. It can't just be concentrated in the top 1 or 2%. There's just not enough revenue there. It would be an adjustment that I think. We don't want to go through this. And to be fair, that's the reason no candidate right now has a huge incentive to do much about it, unfortunately.
Just kick the can down the road
kick the can down the road and hope the next person will take care of it.
An interesting point that in reading your notes before you spoke before Congress about how the debt could have the potential to be more stubborn. when you think about, where we are in terms of our population, using that as an example, our aging population could actually help us prevent growth in the country.
Oh, it does. I mean, currently, and that is again the best scenario we can hope for to get out of this is, and I think it should be an obsession for us, economists, policymakers, and so on, is how can we grow our tax base? Let's just accept that we have an aging population. We want to take care of them, and cutting benefits there is going to be difficult. Let's just accept that's just a challenge. The only way out of this is to have a bigger tax base, to increase the revenues for the government. The best scenario there is to increase the pie, the size of the pie.
Right.
That's the best scenario we can have for. So things like, more people in the workforce, people working longer, more productivity, more entrepreneurship. Those things should be basic priorities for us. That's the one hope that we have, and it would have to still be a significant amount of growth. Absent that, the demographic pressures make our problems incredible, very, very challenging. In past 10 years or so, Social Security Trust Fund runs out in 2033. That's the latest that I would envision this conversation taking place. At that point, it's not a conversation for bankers, for hedge funds, for fund managers. It's a conversation for 50 million people that are going to think about what happens to my check.
Yeah.
We may have that conversation earlier, but I think no more than 10 years from now.
One of the other things that I guess you also have to factor in when you think about the level of debt is the interest in buying off the debt by other countries around the globe.
That is true.
And the components of some of the relationships that we have or don't have with some of these countries that are used to buying the debt, how that could factor against us as well.
Exactly. That's a really good point. And I think it is something, talking about America becomes self-sufficient also means we become self-sufficient in terms of we can fund our debt ourselves or more or increasingly more. That is challenging. I mean, right now, 40% of the U.S. debt gets sold to ultimately placed in the balance sheets of different agencies in different countries. Becoming self-sufficient forces the U.S. consumers, the U.S. businesses to buy more of that debt, the U.S. banks to do it. I mean, if I force you to buy paper, because that's what I'm doing, you cannot use the money to turn around and eat, buy a house, go shopping, take care of your kids. It could be really challenging. in an environment in which we want to become a little bit more close, a little more self-reliant, it will be a lot more challenging to fund this government without imposing significant penalties on the standard of living.
Take a moment and talk about the importance of having these countries buy that debt and what it has meant for us as ourselves, for our economy in the last many years.
Lower rates and more money. That's lower interest rates. I mean, lower mortgage rates. For the average person in the U.S., lower mortgage rates. That's just it. There's just more money coming in, and as a result, banks don't need to buy government debt. They can turn around and provide mortgages at cheaper rates. That's probably the most common thing they do. It's not the only thing they do, but that's really the most common thing they do. It's been really valuable to us that various parts of the world, people there just have saved a lot, and they view U.S. government debt and the dollar as a place to really store their wealth. They prefer to do that than buy local houses, than invest in the local stock market, than start a business there. They just have that enormous trust in our federal government. And the moment they don't, our federal government loses one very reliable, cheap source of funds and is going to have to replace that in some other way, or is going to have to cut.
Have your comments that you made in front of Congress in March, have you heard back? Have they resonated with some?
I hope they've resonated. We will see. I've heard back. We have some interactions, but I think we both know at this point, and I knew this going into that conversation, going into the election. You just see the themes right now are really, what can we propose that makes people feel like my administration is going to do more for them.
Right.
And so they're not really interested in a conversation about that. Nobody is. I'm being very fair. At this point, nobody is. I think that conversation would be scary, would be difficult, would be uncomfortable, would raise concerns about, okay, so which taxes need to go up? Nobody wants to have that conversation right now. So I think either that conversation is going to be forced on the next administration, or there will be some luminaries there that actually have a forward-looking attitude and think this is something we want to think proactively about and we want to address it. So, what I was surprised how aware people are of the problem.
Right.
They're just not willing to tackle it.
What's unique is the dynamics that we have on Capitol Hill with our political system right now and the division that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't even matter that this really is, it's a solution that would require both parties.
Absolutely.
That neither even is calling the other out about the problem.
I think that's exactly right. Neither one is, and both of them are very comfortable in this world of, okay, I'll see your two and I'll raise you two more. and you know, it's going to be something we deal with in the future. It's very unfortunate. I don't know exactly how we got here, but I know it could end in an instant. And the UK in 2022, and I know people always say the US is not the UK and so on, but this could end in an instant. This could end very quickly and very painfully.
Joao, great to talk to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for having me.
You got it. Joao Gomes, professor of finance here at the Wharton School.
Thank you for listening to The Ripple Effect. We hope you found this episode informative and engaging. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review so that we can continue to bring you the best insight from the Wharton School.